Well, let's take a look at how we can do some lighting patterns with our at-home studio. And you can see that I have everything set up to make portraits now instead of the tabletop that we demoed before. And the difference between the tabletop and the portrait version of this backdrop is that I've extended it all the way to the floor, and I want to make sure that I'm at least your subject or the person that you're taking a portrait of is at least 2 feet from the backdrop. This gives enough room for light to do something different and for shadows not to be cast directly onto the backdrop. The other thing that I have that you don't see in the frame, both of the corners of this backdrop are taped down. That's just so that the backdrop won't roll back towards the backdrop because it has this kind of muscle memory or fiber memory. So right now the lighting on my face should be a lighting pattern called Rembrandt, and we're going to be doing several lighting patterns and demonstrating where you should put your lights in relationship to a person, how you can change the person's orientation so that you can get different visual information out of their face. So right now I'm in Rembrandt lighting, meaning that the key light is coming in over here, and there's just a little bit of that key light carrying over and hitting my cheek right here on the left. So hopefully that's demonstrating it, because I'm just working here without an assistant. So hopefully that's exactly what you're seeing now. Let me show you what happens if I introduce the concept of reflected light into this one light scenario. All of these scenarios are going to be one light, so I'm going to get my reflecting board, and what I'm going to do is just introduce the reflecting board here onto my face so that it could bounce back and then onto the side that is more shaded. And then here we have it introduced there and then away. So introduced and then away. So notice how the light changes on the side of the face and how that really affects the dimensionality, and it takes away some of the contrast overall in the portrait. So let's continue, and we'll go over 4 main lighting patterns. Okay, so for this lighting pattern, we're going to use one light, and it's going to demonstrate split lighting. And split lighting is where you have dramatic side lighting that cuts the highlights to the shadows on a face. And this is going to bring out a lot of texture in your portraits, and it's going to create a very dramatic effect. Depending on the subject, this can be undesirable if you want to present a more ideal portrait of someone. But for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to bring my light over in parallel. And you can see I have a little bit of a modifier on this light because I don't want it to spill as much into the backdrop as I do on my face here. So I'm just modifying the aluminum foil so that it falls directly on my face. And I'm even looking at the shadows of the chair so that I can ensure that it is as parallel as possible at that 90-degree angle. And we'll see how this looks and if we can set this up so that my face is split in two. We might have to lower or raise this light, but let's just have a look. So one of the things that you really want to be aware of is where the fall off is. So I can't really see where the fall off is, but it should be right here in the middle of my face. And this side is going to be in dark shadow. And this is the actual place that you meter for this shot. You're metering on the bright side of the face. So if you have an incident light meter, there's one on that you can download on your phone called My Light Meter. It's a free app, and you just put it up there and you make a measurement, and then you see at whatever your ISO is set to what your exposure would be for the highlights of your photograph, and that's what you set your camera to. Remember, it's really important to get a faster shutter speed in this scenario so that you can stop the motion of your subject and stop the motion of you holding your camera in your hands. So I already know that this light is too far away to give me those shutter speeds. So I'm gonna bring it even closer. I'm gonna have to lower it. All right, so I'm very careful not to have any kind of spill to my backdrop. I have my modifier so that it's not spilling back behind me. And now let me see if I can get this mirror situation set up so I can actually see what I look like. Okay, so now you can see that half of my face has the highlight, and if I turn more into the light, it's going to spill on that side. So it's really important to get a little bit of a definition in the eye here. So you can move the light. In this case, half an inch difference makes a really big difference. So you're going to want to do it incrementally and just work with your subject here. So I have my mirror set up, so I'm looking, and you know, that looks pretty good. The more I move to the light, I might have to bring this in just a little bit closer. There. That looks pretty good. So my frame for this shot is going to be different. I want to create a dynamic kind of way that my body is oriented to the flat plane of the camera, or the focal plane of the camera. So I might want to turn it this way and then turn my face into the light like that. And this is your opportunity to direct your subject and see if you can get a more dynamic type of shot from the scenario that we have here. So we don't have any reflector on the other side. We just have our single light, and we're looking pretty good. So here is, it's about like that. Right there, okay. So that's going to give us our split light. And you might think that this is pretty close to the subject, and it is, but we want to make sure that we highlight and meter our highlight here. All right, so split lighting. Okay, so we have our split lighting pattern set up here, and what lighting patterns can really do is blend into each other. So we're going to go from split lighting to short lighting. And what short lighting is having a majority of the person's face in shadow, and the shadow kind of blending into a highlight on the opposite side of the face. And what this does is it shortens face. It creates a very narrowing effect on a face, and that could be beneficial, especially if you're trying to create this more sleek look and dimension in your photography or in your photograph. So right now I could move this light around, but I only have a very small backdrop to work with. So I'm going to look directly into the light here, and then I'm just going to go and turn my face back this way just a little bit. So right here is pretty good, and I could move the light back a little bit more so that my face over here is in highlight, and then the majority of my face that's in the composition is in shadow. So once you get that effect, we can move, if we move the light just a little bit more ahead of me, you can see now I'm going from short lighting to Rembrandt lighting in just a couple of inches. So that is really what we're learning in this demonstration, is that lighting is a matter of inches, and getting these patterns right is the first step. We just have one light and that's all, but we're really trying to work with our subject so that they can really be in relationship to your camera and the backdrop. So let me just demonstrate that again. We have the light over here, and then we're just looking back. And if we don't want that Rembrandt effect, we can just move our light a little bit more right here, and then we can see that it's working out pretty well. There we go. So you also want to make sure that you get a lot of consideration with your backdrop and how you're modifying the light. So that's all things that you can consider. But here again, just to reemphasize, we have our short lighting coming in here, and then if we move the light just a little bit more and we get that highlight on the cheek right there, and it's just right here is what we're looking for. There we go. And so that will give you a specific effect there. Okay. So think of the difference between short lighting and broad lighting. And broad lighting is what we have set up here. And I'm in the same exact position as I was for short lighting. I would have started here. This is my split light, and I would just move a little bit more so that this part would be in highlight and a majority of my face would be in shadow. But now I've taken away this light and I've moved it over here to my left, and you can see now with broad lighting, majority of my face is in highlight, and then the place that was lit before is in shadow. So now that we have this set up, what this does is it widens the face. So what you want to be aware of is how all of these different patterns bring out dimensionality in your subject. And this is very simple, but we're only going to get more advanced from here. You want to be really aware of your incidental light meter reading, meaning you want to hold it up to the position of the face where you want to have middle gray. And then if this is where you want to have middle gray, like when we were doing our split meter reading, you hold it right here where the brightest part of the face is and you click it. But then if you don't want that, you just move it over to the middle and then you click it and you see your light meter reading. If you want it to be stronger, if you want a faster shutter speed, you bring your light closer. You just have to be aware that light is coming from a specific source. So when you move it, that way that light travels and the way that light comes from one specific source will change, and sometimes you get hot spots and sometimes you get hard lighting. So we don't have any kind of modifiers except the aluminum foil here that's preventing the light from hitting the backdrop in this scenario. But as we learn more, we're going to add reflectors and diffusers to our lighting conditions so that we can control light even more effectively.